I packed up all my stuff, moved it, and before I officially moved in, they said, "Oh, we've decided to sell the house." We went to the little barrios where we knew that they were living in the trailer parks. They recognized the Franciscan habit immediately. And he came up to me and he said, "Wow, no one knows how to mix them like the Catholic Church." And I heard that several times, you know.
So Tito, we're kicking things off a little differently. We're going to do a draft. Each of us gets 5 picks. We're picking states. However you want to define that, you get the first pick. Which state do you want?
Well, I have a question really quickly. Can I pick a region of a state?
No, you got to pick the whole state.
Okay. I'm going to start with Maine.
Okay. Took that off the board for me. I'm going to go North Carolina.
Oh, that's a
beautiful
good one,
weather, best seasons, great cities.
Okay, this one, it's kind of a stretch, but I'm going to go with Montana.
Oh, man.
Beautiful
country.
country.
So you're going for the beautiful rural places. Yeah. I'm afraid you're going to keep going this route, so I'm going to go I'm going to go Colorado, because I don't want you taking that.
That's fine. That wasn't on my list anyway.
Oh, good. Okay.
Beautiful area. Don't want it. All right. For my next one, I am going to go California.
Oh, that was not on my list at all.
Yeah. And I got to be honest, I was on the fence. I was on the fence about it. I want the food.
Yeah, the food. And, there's north and south. There's lots of California. It gets a bad rap, but there's a lot of great things about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Tennessee. I got North Carolina, Tennessee right next to each other. Got the whole kind of mid-Atlantic there. Beautiful mountains, gorgeous area.
I'm going very close. Kentucky.
Beautiful area. Yes. I was going to go one or the other.
Yep.
Don't know much about it, but the times I've driven through it, been gorgeous. I'm going to go, sticking with T, I'm going to go Texas. Okay. Don't really care for the sports all that much, but man, you've got Houston, San Antonio, Dallas. You've got Austin. I mean, you got a lot going on there.
That's true. I saved this one for last because I knew you would never take it.
Florida.
Yeah. It's my home state.
Fair
it's
enough.
Weird. I want it.
Yeah, I also saved this one for last as well because I figured you wouldn't take it. I've gone mostly rural, mostly beautiful places. Let's go with New York. Come on, city vibes. I don't love it that much, but come on, to visit, the economy, someone's got to power all this stuff.
And you can have it.
Well, Tito, one of the reasons I love doing this is just to think about where we might go in our lives. We're itinerant preachers. We go to different places. We've moved already a couple times in our lives. Interesting enough, neither of us picked the states we live in. So that's interesting. But we're talking with a guy today who has moved quite a few times.
Yes.
He's moved 5 times in the last 6 years. He knows some places. He's here to tell where he's been and what he's done. Greg Plata, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thanks, brothers. Good to be with you.
So, 5 times in 6 years? Explain this.
Well, let me go back a little bit. So I'm an Air Force brat. So I think by the time I was 12 years old, we had probably moved about 13 times. We lived over in Europe for a while, down in San Antonio, Texas. So I was born in Philadelphia and finally ended up back in Philadelphia when I was around 13 years old. As a friar, I've been to, Wisconsin, Illinois, Mississippi, now in Ohio. There's probably a couple other states in between that, but we'll unveil that as the time goes on.
That's funny. As an itinerant, you've moved less than your other life.
Yeah, right. I always say
that's a lot, though.
I always say I'm a roaming Catholic, just going from one place to another.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad was in the Air Force, and we only moved 3 times. So, I mean, that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Going to things or running from them?
Yeah, so my dad was in the Air Force, too. He was that friendly face that met you at Lackland Air Force Base down in Texas. But, sometimes we, on a military salary, when you have 5 kids, sometimes you're looking for a cheaper rent. You might even move down the street to find a cheaper rent. So that's why that was included in that moving spree.
Gotcha.
Well, we just did our draft. Who had the best picks, and what did we leave off? Who won the draft?
That's a good question. I think I'd have to go with Tito because even though you both had great choices, okay? You both had great choices, but I love Florida. I mean, yes, it's been
Yes.
ravaged by the hurricanes and all that, but it's a great
My
place.
man.
I was thinking about taking it fourth just because I knew he was going to take it. Because I mean, there are great parts of Florida as
There really
well.
are.
Sure.
Yeah.
But of the 50 states, it's not my top five.
It's in mine. I love it. It's weird. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to pretend like Florida people aren't weird. We are. But you know what? I don't care. It's a beautiful place. Great weather. It's, it's
Great
a peninsula.
weather.
Great weather. Yeah.
It's a
warm.
swamp.
Nah, come on. It's warm. It's perfect for going to the beach. And guess what? There's beaches everywhere. I love it.
And gators.
Yeah, whatever. You just, run crooked.
So tell us, Greg, you lived 5 places in the last 6 years. Is that normal for friar life?
No, it's not. So when I was asked to be the vocation director for our legacy province, which was the Assumption province, the first thing I said, well, I'd like to be in a metropolitan area just for transportation, logistics. So they said, oh, yeah, well, you can go to our house in Chicago. Well, I packed up all my stuff, moved it, and before I officially moved in, they said, oh, we've decided to sell the house.
Oh, no.
So the next thing is I pack up my stuff and met with the provincial at the time. And he said, well, we've got this beautiful place. I think maybe you guys did your novitiate there in Burlington, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And we'd like some friars to live there because, if you don't live in a house, it begins to kind of die inside. So I said, sure. So 5 of us lived there. About 5 months later, we get an email saying the council wants to meet with you. We're going to be closing it.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my gosh.
Pack up again, move my stuff to Franklin, Wisconsin, which was our provincial headquarters. And then after that, I was there for maybe about 6 months, and I knew that there was going to be this formation of a new province. It was inevitable. So I talked to the vocation director who worked with me in the Midwest. He was with another province, Brother Tom Smith. And I said, Tom, wouldn't it be great if we worked together? And their province said, well, look, we've got this house on the north side of Chicago, so you guys can be there. And it was a great place, but the only problem was it was old. It needed a lot of maintenance. So when you're on the road for like 3 weeks and you come home, you got to cut the grass, you got to clear the gutters, blah, 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 blah. It was just too much. And so Mike Sarufka, one of our friars, invited me to come to Gary, Indiana. And I said, great, just perfect for Franciscans. It was in a poor area. Needed a lot of love and attention. There were 4 parishes the bishop offered us. So I went there. I loved it, and I think the people really loved the friars there. But then when we had our new province and our chapter, I got a call and they said, we'd like you to go to Cincinnati. And so here I am, packed up again and moved to Cincinnati. So.
Well, I find when I move that I pare stuff down. You're like, oh, I don't need this anymore. Why am I moving this? Are you down to anything left? I mean, you just got like a couple T-shirts now.
Believe it or not, I mean, it's we take a vow of poverty, and I think we try to live a simple life too. But I have a real passion for life, so I still have a set of golf clubs and a bike and so forth like that. And when I'm here in Cincinnati, I'm hoping just to go through everything and just say, do I really need this? And just have a yard sale or just take it down to the St. Vincent de Paul Society. So that's one of my major goals.
All right. Yeah, I remember when I went to college and then was discerning religious life, I ended up moving like 3 or 4 times. And each move, I was like, first I filled my car, and then I was leaving my car, selling it. So I filled like 5 or 6 suitcases. And then it was like 4 bags. By the time I arrived at Postons, they had 4 bags. I'm like, I can't believe everything I need in life is 4 bags. And now it's like I'm back to filling up a car.
Well, with my studio now, I actually brought a moving truck, like one of those small U-Hauls. Now, granted, we closed a parish when I left the last place. And so I had extra beds and furniture. So it wasn't all my stuff. But it was like, oh my gosh, what have I acquired?
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what happened to me, too, because when I moved from the house in Chicago, they said, you have to get rid of everything. And I'm like, well, so we opened it up to the friars in the area, take whatever you need and so forth, but there were still lots of kitchen gadgets. And so I just put it in a trailer, took it to the cathedral, And then I just brought it here, figuring I'll dispense it out to the other friars in the area. So hopefully, like I said,
You could do what a lot of friars do when they move out, is just leave random things in closets or around, like, oh, someone will use it. Like, no,
yeah. And then
if you don't want it, throw it away.
and then the guardian has
Exactly.
a fit, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking about some of the tools at St. Joe's in Chicago that myself and John moved there for the workshop, and I know that some of it stayed behind because other guys said they were interested in doing woodworking. So I'm like, that house. Those tools need to go somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, it is a beautiful part of our life, though, and I'll say I haven't quite had the Air Force experience like the two of you, but I moved twice when I was real little, don't really remember, but kind of know. But then we moved twice when I was in middle school and high school, and then moving in and out of college, and then moving with the Friars. I do kind of get itchy if I've been in a place for a little while, because I lived 11 years in one place, and that's the longest I've ever lived. The second longest I've ever lived is right now. My assignment is 5 years. Everything else is 2 or less. And so there's something about the exploration. There's something about the adventure. The downside, of course, is not putting roots, and you don't have those connections that, I always marvel at when people say, oh, I've lived in the same place for 35 years.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh. So there is a downside, but there's the beauty of knowing that we just pick up and, the Lord needs us in another place.
Right. I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had similar experiences. For me, it's about 5 years. After about 5 or 6 years, I get antsy. The longest I've lived anywhere was Arizona. It was 12 years. And now, at 5 years, I was ready to go. But if I'm going to be perfectly honest, the minute
5
we
minutes,
arrived,
I was ready to go.
the minute we arrived in Arizona, I was like, get me out of here. It's too hot. It's too dry. And it's too far from the ocean to be this hot. And so, yeah, I was not a fan. I did learn to appreciate certain things about it, but once I hit that 5-year mark, I spent the next 6 years going, when can I go?
Now, I was in Mississippi for 16 years, which kind of surprised me also. It was a great ministry. Once again, it was embedded in a very poor section called the Delta. And some writers have compared the Delta of Mississippi as a third world country. But again, a great place for friars to be. We have an incredible history there, especially with the civil rights movement. When I was there, I noticed that there were a number of Latinos that were in the area. Nobody was outreaching to them. So I remember Andy Brophy, one of our friars who spoke some, pretty good Spanish. And my last name, Plata, actually is Spanish, but I never grew up with that. That was from my Filipino grandfather. So anyway, we put on our habits and we went to the little barrios where we knew that they were living in the trailer parks. They recognized the Franciscan habit immediately, and they came out in droves. And I'll never forget, in my broken Spanish, I said, ¿Quieres celebrar la misa cada mes? Do you want me to celebrate the Mass once a month? And this one woman said, no, Padre, cada semana. Cada domingo, and I'm like, okay, and I feel a little bit of sweat go down my back. So I literally had to learn Spanish. I had to bone up, and and so within a couple of years, we had a great community of Hispanics, and we're still serving them down there.
Nice. Yeah,
it's amazing how the Lord throws us into things that we don't expect, and
for sure,
sometimes the Lord speaks like a little old Spanish lady.
Right.
It's true.
Padre. Yes.
Yeah. Cada domingo.
Casey had to learn the Spanish Mass too. He says it better than I do.
I probably said it more times than you have.
Oh, you have for sure. That's the thing. I just don't get the opportunity to practice out here that much.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is being in Cincinnati, one of the parishes that is served by the Friar St. Clement's has a very active Hispanic community. So I told one of our brothers, Judd, I said, if I'm available and you need help, I'd love to help out, because it's just good to keep practicing it. And the people, I think, are so appreciative of us going out of our way to try and speak the language. They know we're not perfect, but then again, their English isn't perfect. But one of the beauties of being Catholic is when you come to Mass, no matter what language it is, you're not anticipating, like, what do I do next? There's this beautiful format to the liturgy. And that repetition brings a lot of comfort, because okay, I know it's to stand. I might not know the words of the verse of the Alleluia, but I know it's an Alleluia verse, and I know we're going to have the gospel next. So that's the
Hmm.
beauty of Catholicism, no matter what language you enter into.
It's one big family, and you start
Yeah.
to realize that, oh, these people that I don't share their culture or language or history, that we are actually brothers and sisters. And it's mind-boggling sometimes. You go all around the world and you have this experience of family. You're like, man, we have nothing in common, and yet we have everything in common.
Right.
That's
And
one thing that my dad commented on a lot when we were in the military is no matter where we were, if we were visiting some other country or something, when we went to mass, he knew what was going on. He knew where we were. He might not know, like he might not be ready for the responses and stuff like that, but he knew what was happening, and it gave him a sense of comfort and familiarity.
what's interesting too, this whole concept of the Catholic family, the universal family. When I was in Greenwood, I was very good friends with a lot of the ministers down there from different denominations. And I'll never forget, it was the Easter Vigil, and I'm looking down, and there is the minister from the Methodist Church. And he came up to me afterwards, because we had brought a number of people in through the RCIA that I think it was like 17 people came into the church.
Wow.
And they were Hispanic. A couple people were Asian, African American, and of course, Southern white. And he came up to me and he said, wow, no one knows how to mix them like the Catholic Church. And I heard that several times, and it's true.
Hmm.
Nobody knows how to mix
Yeah.
them like the Catholic Church.
Especially, historically in the South, there was no mixing except for the
Right.
Catholic Church. I mean, it was the
Yeah.
only place, and we were the ones who integrated the schools first. We were the ones who integrated the churches first. It was a place where everyone could be equal and welcome. And I think about that with our Franciscan tradition as well. When you go back to the 13th century, where could you find a prince and a pauper in the same place? Where could you find the royalty and the leper at the same table? It was our house and the only place in the world.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah.
Oh, I want to go back to your time in Mississippi. You said you were sent to the Delta. I'm and you guys kind of discovered the Hispanic community there. But why were you sent there? Like, what was the objective? Was it a parish that you guys were running? What was it that you guys were doing there?
Well, first of all, I wanted to go there. I had always wanted to be a missionary. I had an uncle who was a Christian brother, and he was from the East Coast province, because, of course, being from Philadelphia. So he went to the Philippines, and he was one of the co-founders of De La Salle in Bacolod on the island of Negros Occidental. And our family we loved him. He would come back like every 7 years, and we would do all the shopping for Christmas gifts, and then we'd get a container. We found out this company that said, yeah, we'll ship it over for free. And we'd send a lot of stuff over there. So that missionary spirit was inspired by my uncle. He later on became a priest for the Diocese of Bacolod, because what was happening was he was taking these kids off the street whose parents were in prison, and they had no place to go. So we started this home, and it just grew and grew and grew. And he realized that there was sacramental ministry that was lacking. So he asked to be ordained and did so. And he actually became a Filipino citizen. So that was my inspiration. So I didn't know if I'd have a chance to go overseas, but I thought, you know what? Right here in our own country, we have the domestic missions. And I'd heard these great stories about Mississippi, like Father Nathaniel Macheski going down there, wearing his habit. And of course, we're like 2% of the population in Mississippi.
Right.
But Catholic and Protestant loved him. However, he was also prophetic, because he realized, so we went down there and we were working at a white parish first. And then we said, but our intention here is to work with the poorest of the poor, which at that time was the African American community. So we started a parish there, and then we started a school. And it just had a lot of great success. A lot of times they were scraping nickels together to make ends meet, but God always provided. But we had some incredible people that graduated from that little Catholic school in the Delta that went on to bigger and greater things. And they would come back years later and say, my foundation was because of St. Francis School. It gave me the fundamentals that I needed, the faith, the discipline, and the love from the sisters and the friars. We had a group of Franciscan sisters who ministered with us. So I walked into this legacy. And as I said, Father Nathaniel Macheski and the other friars there, like Father Dan Novak, one thing that's different about Catholic pastors and Protestant pastors, and not to put down our Protestant brothers and sisters in any way, but they're scrutinized by their congregation and they can get fired. Okay.
Yeah.
We can't get fired. Okay. So you can
true.
be prophetic, you might irritate the people and all that, but you stand for the truth. And Father Nathaniel, who is also loved by the white Catholics, kind of ticked them up by kind of challenging the social order of that day and saying, you know what? Our black brothers and sisters are suffering because of the segregation. So he initiated a boycott. And some of the leaders, or I should say some of the business people, were Catholic and their businesses were hurting. So it caused a little bit of a rift in the Catholic community between the white and the black. That would heal, of course, years later. But I always admired Nathaniel for doing that. So again, I walked into this legacy, but now there was a new movement again with the Hispanic community, and we also had 3 other parishes. So at one point, I was pastoring 4 parishes, plus had the school, and working with 3 cultures: African American, Hispanic, and Southern white. So it was interesting.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I love those stories, though. And we have some in our legacy province as well. I'm going to assume 70, 80 years ago, Friar was sent down to South Carolina, and he said, all right, where's the church? And he was told, wherever you found it. And he was just sent to an area and said, there's a lot of unchurched people, and you need to go. And so he's fine. And he basically just took a soccer ball and food, and he found the kids, and he started playing soccer with them and started ministering to the parents until little by little they would meet to pray, and they'd meet for Mass, and then they'd build a church. And we had the church for 60, 70 years, and he just started it on a whim.
Mm-hmm. It is amazing when you walk in faith. You don't know where the Lord's going to take you, but you just say, okay, Lord, look, I'm at your disposal. Use me as you can, and the miracles that flourish because of that attitude. So that was my experience.
Yeah, and we need that attitude. I mean, just that what you said, that everyone thinks of going to Africa or the Philippines or South America, go on mission, but we are all commissioned in our own local areas. Do we have that same sense of urgency to say, look, on a Friday, Saturday night, where are people? What are they doing? How do I meet and engage? Because on Sunday morning, they're not coming to Mass. They're not going to their local services. And so there are lots of people that could be reached right here if we would just simply reach out to them.
Mm-hmm. And something that, Casey's touched on in previous videos and stuff like that is, for a long time, the mantra was they'll come back. Well, now they've never been. So there's nothing for them, there's nothing to come back to. There is something to come to, but there is no sense of coming back because, they were never brought in the first place. So we have to go out and encounter them and then bring them back with us.
Which is an interesting transition for your work now. So you work in vocations, and you've had 2 stints. Do you find that it's harder or easier to work in vocations now than the first time you did it?
Well, there's been a big shift in the culture. When I first started, a lot of guys had been connected to some of the institutions that we ran, such as our colleges and our high schools and so forth. Well, that's dissipated a bit. But what I find today is some genuine conversion experiences where guys were not connected to the church. And something evolved in their lives, or it may have been a trauma or whatever, and they really found Christ in a unique way. So what do? They want to further explore Catholicism, and they get on the internet, and they want to be involved in community, which is a really important thing for a lot of young people today. And that's how they pop up to the Franciscans. And I got to say, Casey and Tito, you have an invaluable, what should I call it, service to the church. So many of the guys that come to us say, oh, yeah, do you know Father Casey Cole? Do you know Father Tito? And I say, of course I do. They're members of our province. And but the evangelization that you do many times brings the guys to say, I want to check out the Franciscans further. And then, of course, they call our New York office. And the way the structure is, it's pretty cool. So we've got this province now that goes from coast to coast. But there's 3 regions, the West, the Central, where I live and minister, and then the East Coast. But everything gets filtered through our New York office, and we've got a terrific staff there. And so when they get these names, they'll say, hey, you know what? This is in Father Greg's region. We're going to send his information to you on the database, and boom, I call and connect. One of the unique things that, and you want to talk about how God works, I use a small RV to get around to visit these guys. It's about the size of an Amazon truck. And let me tell you real quick how I got it. It's COVID, right? So Brother Tom and I, who was the vocation director of the Sacred Heart province back in the day, he and I were having these Zoom masses, and we just connected with all these people around the United States. And so somebody would be doing the Liturgy of the Word from, say, New Orleans, and another person would be the cantor from Washington, D.C. It was just a great gathering.
Wow.
And people started sending us donations. So I asked the province, could I put together a little side fund for it? And they said, sure. So fast forward, and I'm praying, thinking, you know what, Lord, I've got such a huge area to cover. I've covered all the way from North Dakota down to the Texas-Mexico border. I said, it would be so economical if I had a small RV and meet these guys in their towns and so forth. How am I going to come up with the money, right? So and I said, Lord, and if it could be a diesel engine, that would be fantastic, right? That's really pushing the envelope. Right, yeah.
And red, not blue.
Well, actually, it's kind of Franciscan tan. So
yeah.
What happened was I'm giving a retreat in Connecticut, and there was this older couple, and they said, could you take some time to pray with us in the chapel? And I said, sure. So I go in the chapel, and we start talking after we pray. And they said, well, what do you do full-time? And I said, I'm the vocation director for the province. And I don't even know how the RV situation came up, but the woman said, I think we might have what you're looking for. And then the husband said, and it's a Mercedes diesel engine. Well, okay, I feel the hair on the back of my neck go up. I said, wow, Lord. Okay. How much are you asking for? And she was apologetic and said, well, you know, we've got to have some money because we're retired and all that. I said, of course. It was almost the exact amount that was in that account for the donations. Gosh. Yeah, so of course, you know, the province would have to pay us.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've got some friends that put a little office in there. It has a slide-out desk, and I've got the little T-Mobile thing for my internet. So, yeah. So it is
Tito
good.
and I have talked about this for years.
Yeah, it's a great way to evangelize.
Yeah.
You go around maybe on a bus or an RV or something like that, hit town to town. Yep. We're going to do it. I'm saying, Tito, summer of 2026, because we got some plans this next summer. But we'll be free, I think, that summer. I think we'll have some opportunities.
Should we finish with Burning Man?
He really wants us to go to Burning Man.
I really want us to go to Burning Man.
Oh, wow.
I'm open to hitting some music festivals for sure, but that one just seems just wild.
But it's more than just a music festival. They have like a spirituality corner, and we can
go
it's
there.
More. Oh,
that's why I'm hesitant.
Such good witnessing we could do, and it would be really cool.
Well, I think the visiting of the baseball stadiums was a great idea, you know. And I forget, but did you guys go to the Padres?
Yeah,
did you go to
30.
the
And the Padres, the Padres was rough because it was also Comic-Con a couple days later, and it was Star Wars Day, the day we were at the stadium.
Oh no,
so
you thought you were ninjas
no
instead of Padres.
Oh yes.
Oh. They thought we were
dressing up like the mascot.
They thought we were dressing up like the mascot. They thought we were super fans. And then some people thought we were Jedi, but not that many. A lot of people recognized, like, oh no, they're dressed as friars. They just didn't realize we were actually friars. And then we had this great conversation on the field, because, you know, we got to be on the field during batting practice, which was awesome. With this guy and his family, and his wife is asking, you know, about our costumes, which they won't be like, oh no, it's not a costume, it's real. We're real friars. And they're like, oh wow, that's so cool. And then like 10 minutes later, the dad goes, so does that thing get hot? And we're like, what thing? And like, the thing you put on your head. And I'm thinking, I don't think this guy knows what a solideo is. And so we're like, what thing exactly? You know, the fake head. And then we both realized, oh, they think we're like real mascots.
Well, he was the only one. I think the wife yelled at him, like, honey, we already covered this.
That's what I was thinking about. I was like, didn't we clarify this 10 minutes ago? So yeah, that was a
Yeah.
funny conversation.
But the habit is
beautiful
really
conversation. Yeah, but the amount of people we got to meet and the doors that opened to talk, whether it was silly like that, where it started with like an embarrassing moment of thinking we were the mascot or dressed up, or people who were faithful Catholics that were like, "What are you doing here? I can't believe there's a priest here." And I heard a confession there. We prayed with people, and then everything in between. You know, one of my favorite stories was we were at a place and a group of 20-something girls late in the game clearly had something to drink. They were having some fun. They call from 100 feet away, 200 feet away, "Hey, you!" You're like, oh gosh, what is this going to be? And we're like, "Hey, come pray with us." I'm like, oh, well, that's not what I expected. And they were a Catholic group that was out just having a good time, and we went and prayed with this group of girls.
Yep.
Never would have had that conversation if we were in jeans and a t-shirt.
That's true.
Wow.
That's true. And it's also not what we were expecting when they said, "Hey, you."
No.
We're like, oh, no.
Well, I mean, the habit really is a wonderful visible sign. When our brother James Lagruda made his solemn vows, his family invited me and several other friars to go out to dinner off of Times Square. So we walked on our habits. It was amazing, the response in the middle of New York City, how people just stopped and said, "Oh, Father, brother, whatever, can I have your blessing?" And they would come up to us and say, "Hey, thank you." Or where was I not too long ago? I was sitting on a plane, and a guy sits next to me, and he starts sharing about his life as a tugboat operator, right? And he's showing me pictures and all that. And he turns to me and he says, "Thank you for what you do in the church. Thank you for your life." So we do make an impact on people.
For sure. Yeah, and thank you for that witness. I think it's so important that we be out in the world. And I often get that from Catholics, just thank you. Thank you for being here. Because, I'm sure you have had experiences as well. Sometimes there's awkward conversations. Sometimes there are challenges. Sometimes you get the wrath of the church. And I haven't had too many of those, but people, they have some anger they want to get out. That happens. But for the most part, people are they're surprised we still exist. And that breaks my heart sometimes. Like, no, we're all around. And sometimes it takes just that little bit of courage to go out into the world and to be a billboard in some ways. And you realize the hurt people have, the need people have, the joy that they have that they just want to share with us.
And you were talking about like some people angry at the church, and it's understandable. And there's where we can, I think, be a source of peace, to not deny it, but say, "You know what, I'm so sorry for your pain." And you think about Francis too, what he went through at times evangelizing, being thrown into the, the culvert, and, but I am the herald of the great king. So Francis himself went through a lot of abuse.
He did. Yeah. Experiencing people's anger at the church was something that happened to me a lot my first few years in habit. And then since then, not so much anymore. And I think part of it is that it was still kind of, that was about 9 years ago. So it was still a time where a lot of wounds were still very fresh. And a lot of places were not really dealing with a lot of the wounds that were caused. I think that's changed now. Now it's a whole lot more of that sort of sense of gratitude of like, oh, it's awesome to see you guys out here. But even back then, I had a grace-filled ability to just take that anger, because typically I'm the kind of person who argues back. And so, but in those moments I didn't. I just took it. I was like, and I kind of saw it as a ministry of like, this anger is a poison in their hearts and they need to get it out. And I just sat there and I took it and I just said, "I'm sorry about, what happened. I'm sorry about what you experienced." And I just apologized. I didn't make any excuses. And I hope and pray that those people could then start healing as a result of that.
Yeah, I always say you never fire.
Given what I see sometimes in the church, rather me than someone else, right? I'd like to be that reconciler.
Yeah. And, I always say you never fight fire with fire, because you both burn up. You fight fire with water. And
it's true.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back. You said that you grew up in Philadelphia, among many other places. Is that where you met the friars?
Yeah. And by the way, being from Philly, yes, even though I'm in Cincinnati and these guys are all Bengals
Mhm.
fan, I am still a big Eagles fan and of course Phillies
Yeah.
fan. I just saw them
Oh,
melt
poor
down.
Phillies.
But anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I digress. But yes, so it's the late 60s, and I'm getting ready to graduate from grade school, and these guys hanging on the corner, they're talking, and they were older guys. Said, "Oh yeah, that Father Stan, he's really different, and Father Gabriel." And these were friars who had come to Philadelphia to teach. They were invited by Cardinal Kroll at the time, and so Philadelphia
Hmm.
had a huge Catholic school system, and they were asked to staff the boys' side of Archbishop Ryan High School. So imagine this huge high school had about 6,000 students, and the friars took care of
Jeez.
the guys' side. And they just, the way they preached at Mass, I mean, the diocesan guys were great, but the friars had a whole different spirit in the way that they relayed their homilies and all that. And so as a kid, I'm kind of fascinated by this. And of course, the older guys, they're in high school now, and they're talking about these different personalities of friars. So I get to the high school, and me and my buddies and all that, and it was massive. It was like a small town. And I'll never forget, it was like, say, the fourth day, and I'm a freshman, and I'm carrying every book that I have because I don't want to miss any book, and I'm terrified of being late for class. I couldn't find my class, and I'm,
Oh
I'm
no.
struggling to get through and so forth. And here comes Father Ligori, and he stops me and he goes, "Young man, what's your name? Where's your ID?" We all had to have little IDs back then. And I show him, and he looks at it and he goes, "Greg, welcome to the family. Let me walk you down to
Hmm.
your room." I mean, that just blew me away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For the guy, there were 600 and something guys in my graduating class, right?
Wow.
But when you walked into that school, the friars made it feel like it was a community, a home. I loved high school. Um,
Hmm.
they were very cognizant of those guys who were a little bit different at times and all that, to be sensitive to them, never to be a bully or whatever. So the friars really try to imbue in us the values of St. Francis. And when I had my own vocation struggle about where should I go and so forth, I mean, it was a no-brainer. I was going to go with the friars because I just love their charism. One of the things we noticed too is probably there were like 25 friars teaching at the high school at the time. Maybe not teaching, but in maintenance and other different aspects of the school. But they had this great spirit among themselves, and they would joke among themselves and cut up on each other. And I thought, these guys, I mean, yeah, they make mass great, but they also know how to have fun. So that's why I'm a friar.
That's wonderful. And
Yeah.
actually, at least one of those friars had an impact on my mom's side of the family because he would help at the neighboring parish. My mom grew up in North Philly, and she remembers um, Renee,
Oh
I
yeah,
think, Father
sure,
Renee.
yeah. Who's down at our
Hmm.
retirement center in St. Petersburg?
It's St. Petersburg. Yeah, so I'm not sure if he was at the school or a different parish, but he would help out at her parish on the weekends. So she grew up knowing a Franciscan a little bit here or there.
Wow, yeah, Renee
And
taught me also in high school too. And then,
Oh,
of
wow.
course, to live with him, so I was sent there to teach. And just a great guy, very involved in peace and social justice. He was very tied in with the
Mhm.
secular Franciscans, and so the alumni association. When I went back for my 50th reunion, I know I don't look that old, but still, when I went back for my 50th reunion, some of the alumni had actually flown down to Florida to tape Renee giving a message to all of us on the big screen. So that was kind of
Oh,
neat at the
wow.
banquet.
That's
That's
great.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. You never know how those little kind of touchstones or those, you know, minor characters in your life end up coming back and playing a more significant role later on. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Renee in your mom's life, Casey, and then he's also connected to Greg. It's just a lot of ways in which God likes to play with those little moments.
And even
You
if
know,
it
the
was
other
just the
thing I'd like,
smallest seed of preparing her for my vocation, right? So
Right.
she would have never known
Exactly.
what a Franciscan was except for him. Maybe he didn't have a tremendous impact other than that, but even that's amazing.
Hmm.
yeah. One of the things too I noticed about the friars is they were really down to earth. And when they were in the classroom, they were really down to earth. And that's what I liked about them. I said, you know what? I could be a part of this group growing up in Philly. I could be a part of this group, you know.
Yeah.
Some other religious groups that I noticed were very, pretentious and with the hands folded. And I thought, I don't know. I don't think I'd be ever able to fit in with this group and all that. But the friars are real.
Yeah, there's a
We are
friar
real.
that I
You
knew.
see what you get.
Right.
There's a friar that I knew who he said when he was starting his discernment, he went to visit a diocesan seminary. I won't say where, but he did say that the seminarians were all being waited on. The waiters had gloves that they would wear, and he was like, "I don't fit in here." and then he went on a come and see with the friars. He wakes up early. He comes downstairs. There's an old friar hanging out in the kitchen drinking coffee. And he sees him and he goes, "You one of the visitors?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay. You like eggs?" "Yeah." He goes, "All right, there's eggs in the fridge. You better start making them. These guys are going to be hungry."
Yeah.
And he was like, "I think I found my people."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love, even in the last 3 months, I was in Italy over the summer. The minister general drove me to the airport. When I came back from a different trip, the provincial, Larry, picked me up from the airport. And Tito and I will be in a diocese in a couple days tomorrow, and the bishop will be our personal chauffeur. And so
Wow.
this is the model of the church that we love, where the leaders are actually the servants. And it's just very humbling. Like, wow,
Yeah.
normally you'd expect me to have to serve them, or the people of God having to serve the holy bishop or holy provincial. But no, it really should be this, that they're called to serve us. And as Franciscans, we are called to be the first servants as leaders. And I think that's what I found when I joined as well.
Only in the friars will someone go from being the minister general to a novice master again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Or
It
working a soup
amazes
kitchen.
me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I often think, too, that some of our brothers, I mean, every one of our brothers has some sort of talent and gift that they share. But some of the guys, I think, these guys could be like CFOs or CEOs of these big companies, and how they have responded to their vocation to live this radical, I always call it a radical expression of love, that we submit ourselves to God and love many times the unloved. And that's, to me, been one of the greatest blessings of being a friar. Can I tell a quick story?
Please do.
I was at a
course.
nursing home, and when I was at CTU, Catholic Theological Union at the time, I went to what they call a ministry practicum. You only do it for a year, but I decided I'm going to stay 4 years at this place. And I remember I used to go to this nursing home, and you'd walk in there, and it was a public nursing home, the smell of urine, and it was just really bad. But I thought, these are God's children, and many of them had no family or whatever. So it was like a nice little community. So we had Mass for them. We brought them over to a parish. I got a bus, gave them presents. We had a nice meal for them after the Mass. And I remember taking them back to the nursing home. No one said thanks. And that kind of just hurt my little pride there, right? But, they're focused on their gifts, and this has been a great
Right.
experience for them. Well, all of a sudden, the elevator comes down and opens the door, and Irene comes out. Now, Irene was probably about 65 years old and profoundly mentally disabled, right? And we had gotten this dress for her, and she comes running up and just puts her arms around me and squeezes, and then goes back into the elevator. And I just said, Lord, this is all worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
all
in
the
my life
difference.
as a friar, there have been so many people that have, said thank you. I mean, I'm not looking for the thanks. It's nice to hear it every so often.
Right.
And it's nice as we as friars to thank the staff and the people that serve us in our parishes and all that. But in so many ways, people have said thank you. I mean, when you comfort someone who's lost a child or a husband, or, they've gone through some really tough times, and you've been there just to listen, and you can tell how much they appreciate. That's really God working through us. But my life, I always felt as a friar, I am fulfilled. I love being a friar. I love what I'm doing. The guys that I live with, I love them, And being a friar, let's face it, we don't choose the guys that we live with, but my uncle, who I talked about earlier, he was in community too with Christian brothers, and he said, Greg, let the friars be the hammers that can bang you to perfection. That makes a lot of sense, right? Let them be the hammers that can bang you to perfection. So
rings very true.
It's true. I mean, it is, I think, an image of the kingdom of God where it is a representation of everybody and not necessarily the ones I would pick.
And then again, well, they have picked me too. So there you go.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your vocation, your witness. We pray that you'll have great luck continuing to spread the faith and to welcome guys. But of course, we know from our conversation, not luck, it's providence that you have such faith in, and God answers our prayers. Before you go, it's 5 times in 6 years. What's the next 2 years? Are you going to live 3 more places? Do you have anything planned out yet? You're getting a little itchy. You've been there a couple months.
I'm just living one day at a time, guys. One day at a time.
That's the way.
Yep, I hear that. Well, it's been great to have you.
We appreciate you giving some time to us. We'll definitely pray for you and all that you do.
And thanks for the great ministry you guys do.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Tito, that's something to go from 16 years in one place to 5 times 6 years serving the poor, learning Spanish, going all around the country. I mean, it's not a life for everyone, but man, is it a life for some people. And it's a great life.
It is a great life. It's challenging, and so much of what he said, especially at the end, there where the friars kind of, as he said, hammer us into perfection. It's true though. Itinerancy helps us with our vow of poverty. Our brothers keep us humble. We have this call to littleness, this call to being little brothers, and there's so much about our life that resonates with what the areas that I need to grow in. And so I love that. And just hearing his story kind of reminds me of that.
And come on, man, a camper, a trailer, traveling around.
I know. I was thinking about that when he said, I was like,
that.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, man, we've talked about this.
Yeah. Maybe we can get a bigger one and all 3 of us can go.
Ooh, all right. That's going to be even a big one. 3 people's tight.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll work it out. We've got some time. We might not be ready to move just yet, but
that's true.
Wonderful conversation as always. Just loving the brothers, and what a great example that the world calls us to be main characters, but look what a minor character can do. So many wonderful things, answering God's call, and so we invite everyone. Maybe not being a main character, but maybe a minor character is for you. Hope you have a wonderful week. We'll catch you next week.